The neighbors watched in horror as luxury turned to chaos overnight. Designer gowns strewn across the pavement, shattered perfume bottles glinting like broken dreams, and a billionaire standing at the door with cold eyes. But what triggered this storm? Mr. Jake Stories welcomes you. I'm so glad you're here, because every story we tell holds a lesson, a tear, and sometimes a miracle. Before we begin, I pray for you. May your life be filled with divine favor, unexpected breakthroughs, and peace that no storm can shake. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that could change your life. Now, let's dive into today's story. The night air was unusually quiet in Palm Beach. The kind of stillness that only came before a storm, but not the kind where the forecasters predicted. This was personal. It was emotional. It was a type of storm that changed lives. Michael Carrington, whose face regularly graced Forbes covers and finance channels, stood motionless under the grand archway of his mansion. The security lights bathed the white marble driveway in a harsh, unforgiving glow. His jaw was locked, fists clenched at his sides as if holding back a dam of emotion. Around him, the chaos had already begun. Housekeepers and security guards moved swiftly but reluctantly, following direct orders. They carried out garment bags, show boxes, jewelry cases, and stacks of old letters and notebooks, all belonging to Elena Carrington, his wife of 7 years. Expensive silk scarves fluttered like surrender flags in the sea breeze. A crystal vase cracked on the concrete, scattering petals and broken glass across the steps. Elena's life was being dismantled, not by divorce lawyers or quiet conversations, but by brute humiliation. And still, she hadn't emerged. 3 houses down, the Lawsons peered through their window, barely concealing their shock. Even for Palm Beach, a town seasoned with scandal, this felt different. What on earth is happening? Mrs. Lawson whispered, clutching her robe tighter. Her husband gave a low whistle. Looks like Michael finally snapped. But Elena? She doesn't seem the type. Inside the mansion, Elena stood at the top of the stairs, frozen. Her silk robe hung loosely off one shoulder, her hair tied back from a night of restless sleep. She had heard the shouting, the heavy footfalls, the sound of drawers being flung open. But she hadn't expected this. Not Michael. Not like this. She slowly descended the staircase, her eyes catching the sight of her grandmother's antique jewelry box being carried toward the door. "Stop," she said softly. No one listened. They were under orders. She repeated it louder. I said, "Stop." Michael turned, his face unreadable, his eyes hollow. "They adjust things," he said flatly. "You won't need them where you're going." Elena stepped down the last stair, her voice trembling. "What are you doing? What's all this?" He stared at her, not the way a man looks at his wife, but like a stranger trying to figure out what kind of enemy she was. "I warned you, Elena. I told you what would happen if you ever humiliated me." Her breath caught. "Humiliated you? What are you talking about?" Michael walked up to her slowly, his voice dropping, deadly calm. "I saw the pictures. You and that man, laughing, touching, sneaking around like I wouldn't find out. I might be busy, Elena, but I'm not stupid." She blinked. "You hired someone to follow me." He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped past her. "I built this life from nothing, from less than nothing, and I gave you everything. But the one thing I asked for was loyalty, respect, and now you've thrown that away." A lump formed in her throat, but her voice was steady. "His name is Julian. He's my friend. He's been my friend since I was 16. He's gay, Michael, married. He was helping me plan something for you. Something special." Michael paused at the doorway. The wind caught his shirt slightly, flaring it like a cape. "You think that changes anything?" he said without looking at her. "You still lied. You still kept secrets. I don't care if it's gay or purple or made of plastic. You didn't tell me. You made me look like a fool." Elena stepped toward him, each step feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "I kept it a surprise because you hate being involved in things that don't benefit you. I thought maybe if I just made it beautiful enough, you'd see. You'd remember what we were." He turned to face her finally, and for a moment, she saw it, a flicker of the man she married. The boyish charm, The driven fire, the vulnerability that only peeked out late at night when the world was asleep and he let his guard down. But then it vanished, hidden behind a wall of pride too tall to climb. "You should have known better," he said. "You know what I've been through, what I built. I don't have space in my life for shadows and half-truths. You should have said something. You didn't. So now, this is what's left." With that, he walked outside. Elena stood in the center of the foyer, the silence pressing in like a weighted blanket. Her heart was pounding, but oddly, she felt no panic. Just sadness. Deep, knowing sadness. She had spent the last 7 years pouring herself into this life. Not the mansion, not the wealth, but the hope that, beneath all the armor, Michael would learn how to love without fear. She walked to the front door and opened it fully. The neighbors were still watching. The photographers, already tipped off, had arrived. Flashes at the street like a storm of tiny lightning bolts. She saw one of the maids struggling with a suitcase, clearly distressed. Elena stepped down the steps and gently took the bag from her hands. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to do this." "But Mr. Carrington, it's not your burden." She placed the bag down on the lawn, adjusted her robe, and stood tall. The cameras clicked furiously. One reporter called out, "Mrs. Carrington, is it true you were caught cheating?" Another shouted, "Will there be a divorce?" She ignored them all. Behind her, the massive iron doors slammed shut. Inside, Michael leaned against them, breathing hard. For all his fury, there was a gnawing feeling in his gut. Something wasn't right. Something wasn't whole. His assistant called. He didn't pick up. The silence in the mansion felt louder than ever. Elena sat on the edge of the sidewalk, her bare feet against the warm stone, surrounded by pieces of her life. A silk scarf her mother had given her. The first book of poetry she ever published. A photo album filled with quiet Sundays and smiles before Michael's world became too big for small joys. She picked up the journal she had been writing in. The leather was cracked, the corners bent. Inside were entries he never read. Pages filled with dreams of a life not defined by banquets and brand names. A life where they could be just two people, not a brand. A black SUV rolled up quietly. Her sister, Marissa, stepped out, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "Elena, what happened?" Elena stood, brushing her robe gently. "It's over, Maurice. He thinks I betrayed him. And maybe, in a way, I did." Her sister looked confused. "Did you cheat?" "No, but I stopped believing he'd change. And I stopped asking him to. Maybe that's the worst kind of betrayal. Giving up quietly." Marissa looked at her, heartbroken. "Come home with me." Elena nodded. She looked one last time at the mansion. The high walls, the spotless windows, the cold elegance. And then she turned away. As they drove off, Michael watched from the upstairs window. She didn't look back once. The house felt colder than it ever had. The kind of cold that money couldn't insulate. He poured a glass of whiskey, stared out at the sea, and whispered to himself, "What if I was wrong?" But he said it too late. And outside, scattered in the grass like forgotten treasure, were not just Elena's belongings, but the pieces of a life that could have been something beautiful. The video of Elena sitting barefoot among her scattered belongings reached 10 million views in less than a day. The clip, captured by a local teenager on her way home from a friend's house, showed Elena Carrington calmly folding a silk gown and placing it back into an open suitcase. Her robe fluttered gently in the wind, and though her face was framed in tiredness, there was no hysteria, no shouting, just stillness, dignity. One pair of heels lay on the street beside her, scuffed and expensive. The caption beneath the video read, "Billionaire dumps wife's life on the street. She doesn't shed a tear." It was a scene both haunting and magnetic. Social media erupted in arguments. Was she the cold-hearted trophy wife who finally got caught? Or was she a quiet woman crushed beneath the weight of a controlling man's empire? Michael Carrington refused interviews. He buried himself in board meetings and business acquisitions, letting the public feed on its own theories. His PR team issued a stiff statement. "Mr. Carrington and Mrs. Carrington are in the process of resolving a private matter. We asked for respect during this time." But respect was in short supply. A day after the video went viral, a new voice entered the storm. Julian Hart, The man from the blurred tabloid photographs, tall, fashionable, and unmistakably not a romantic rival, released his own message. "Let me be clear," Julian said, staring directly into the camera. "I am married, happily, and the only secret Elena Carrington was keeping from her husband was a surprise she had planned for him. She was organizing a private art exhibit featuring pieces Michael personally collected over the years. She hoped it would remind him of their early love when they met over a painting in a small gallery downtown. I was helping because I've known her since high school, and because she's one of the most loyal people I know." That clip exploded, too. Suddenly, Michael wasn't just a powerful man. He was a man who had possibly ruined his marriage over a misunderstanding. Worse, he had humiliated a woman who had tried to do something kind for him. Elena, meanwhile, had gone quiet. She was staying with her sister in a modest beachside home, a far cry from the sprawling estate she'd once called home. She gave no interviews, responded to no reporters. But that only made her more fascinating. The woman who didn't defend herself. The woman who didn't fight. In that silence, people began to fill in their own truths. A journalist for a major outlet wrote a long-form profile titled "The Gilded Cage." Who is Elena Carrington really? It painted a picture of a woman who had always stood in the shadows of her husband's success, even while maintaining her own passions quietly: art, community work, and youth mentorship. Donations she had made anonymously to inner-city programs were uncovered and shared widely. Comments flooded in. She never wanted the spotlight. She just wanted to help. Meanwhile, Michael's business image took a hit. Shareholders began to express concern. Investors hesitated on a major acquisition deal he had worked on for nearly 2 years. If he can implode his personal life this dramatically, one whispered of record, what's to stop him from making emotional decisions in the boardroom? The irony wasn't lost on Michael. For years, he'd operated under the belief that personal vulnerability was weakness. His father had been reckless, and his mother too forgiving. He had built a life around discipline, control, power, and he had kept Elena at arm's length when she offered love instead of obedience. Now that arm was empty. He sat in his study late at night, whiskey untouched beside him, watching the videos play over and over. He noticed things he hadn't before. The way Elena pressed her lips together tightly to avoid crying, the way she gently gathered every item, treating even broken things with care. The public had seen it too. She had become a symbol, not of wealth or scandal, but of composure, of grace in the face of public cruelty. He wasn't sure when the change began inside him. Maybe it was when his assistant, Megan, who'd worked with him for over a decade, finally lost patience. She burst into his office one afternoon and tossed a stack of magazines onto his desk. "Everyone's talking about her," she said, "and not the way you wanted." "I didn't want any of this," Michael snapped. "No, you just set fire to a marriage and handed the world a match pick," Megan replied. "You didn't even talk to her before you threw her out." "She lied. She planned a surprise. Since when is that a crime? You didn't even ask her." He was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, "I was scared." That confession seemed to drain the anger from Megan's face. She sat down. Of what? Of being the fool. Of not seeing something bad before it happened. Of letting myself trust someone and being wrong. Megan's voice softened. "You weren't scared of her, Michael. You were scared of you, of what you might feel." That night, he reread some of the letters Elena had written him in their early years. He found them tucked away in the bottom drawer of his bedside table, handwritten, thoughtful, hopeful. In one, she'd written, "I know you think the world is always waiting to betray you, but I'm not the world. I'm just me, and I want to be on your side, if you let me." He felt something break inside him. Meanwhile, Elena had started working quietly on something of her own. With the help of her sister and a few loyal friends, she began moving forward with a long-abandoned dream, opening an art school for underprivileged youth. It had been her vision before she married Michael. But life had pulled her in a different direction, one shaped by charity galas and business dinners. Now, she wanted to reclaim that vision. Donations poured in. People inspired by her story offered everything from money to supplies to teaching support. She named the school Grace and Grit. It would be located in a reproposed library building near the city's edge, a place long forgotten by luxury developers but rich in spirit. The opening ceremony was scheduled for just 3 months after the day her life had imploded. When word reached Michael that she was launching a school, he felt the urge to show up, to explain, to help, maybe even to beg. But he resisted. Not yet. Not until he had something real to offer. Instead, he called Julian to apologize. There was a long pause on the line before Julian answered. "It's not me you need to say it to." "I know," Michael said, "but I need to start somewhere." He sent a quiet, anonymous donation to Grace and Grit. It was a substantial amount, but he didn't put his name on it. Instead, he signed it in honor of Grace Evelyn White, Elena's grandmother. She received the donation letter one morning and read it twice. The handwriting was familiar, the message simple. She said nothing to anyone about it, but tucked it into her desk drawer. 2 weeks before the opening of the school, Elena stood in what used to be the library's reading room. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. Paintings from local artists decorated the walls. The smell of fresh wood and possibility lingered in the air. She picked up a brush and began painting one of the final signs herself. "Welcome to Grace and Grit." A child's voice behind her said, "Miss Elena, did you really live in a castle?" She turned and smiled at the girl, no older than 8. "Something like that. But castles are just buildings. What matters is what you build inside your heart." The girl beamed. "This place is better." Elena nodded. "I think so too." Outside, another group of children arrived, laughing and playing. Parents chatted by the doors. Volunteers organized supplies. The place was alive with energy, not the polished hush of Michael's estate, but the vibrant hum of hope. Elena looked around and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile kind that comes from being quiet to avoid a fight, but the solid kind that comes from knowing you are where you are supposed to be, with nothing to hide and nothing to prove. She didn't know if Michael would ever truly understand what he'd lost, or if he would change beyond guilt. But she no longer needed that answer to move forward. The street outside the school buzzed with life, far from the cold marble floors and towering walls of the mansion she left behind. And somewhere, behind the noise, behind the headlines, behind the silence of a man finally realizing the cost of pride, a new story was already beginning. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden hue across the water that shimmered behind the old library-turned-art school. The palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the building pulsed with quiet energy. Grace and Grit was days away from opening, but already it felt lived in, real, a sanctuary built from pain, purpose, and perseverance. Inside, Elena moved between rooms, checking final touches. Each space had its own character, a music corner, a sculpture nook, a room painted entirely in chalkboard paint for creative expression. The classrooms weren't sleek or ultramodern. They were warm, functional, and filled with handmade touches. There were murals of blooming trees, handprint from the early student volunteers, and inspirational quotes painted across the beams, one in particular above the entrance. "You are more than where you come from. You are who you choose to become." Elena stopped to adjust one of the frames on the wall. It was a photo of her grandmother, Grace Evelyn White, sitting in her garden with a book in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. The woman who had raised her, taught her to see beauty in broken things, and who had whispered one night, "If you ever find yourself in a house that's too silent, too cold, get out before your soul freezes." She hadn't listened at first, but now she understood. Behind her, the door creaked slightly. She turned, expecting one of the volunteers, but instead, there he stood, Michael. He looked thinner than she remembered, less polished, his usual custom-tailored suit replaced by a simple button-up and jeans. No entourage, no PR mask, just him. "Elena," he said, his voice quiet. She didn't speak, not at first. Her hands fell loosely to her sides, the framed photo forgotten for a moment. He took a cautious step forward. "I'm not here to complicate anything. I saw the school was opening soon. I wanted to see it, and to say something. If you'll let me." Elena studied him, not his clothes or his tired eyes, but the energy around him. It was different. Still Michael, but stripped of the cold confidence, the arrogance. There was something human there now. Wounded, but honest. She nodded slowly. Okay, say it. He took a breath and let it out. I was wrong. Not just about Julian, not just about the surprise you planned. I was wrong about everything. About how I saw you, how I treated you. I thought control would protect me. That suspicion was a strength. I saw vulnerability as weakness, and I treated your kindness like a threat. He looked around the room, at the art supplies, the laughter echoing faintly from the other end of the hall where few early students were finishing their day's projects. You made something beautiful here, he said, and I had no part in it. That hurts more than I expected. Elena walked past him and sat on a nearby bench. She gestured for him to sit, and after a moment's hesitation, he did. You hurt me, Michael, she said evenly. Not just that day you threw my things out. Long before that, in the way you dismissed my dreams, in the way you never let me in. I felt like a guest in your life, even after 7 years. He bowed his head. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm trying. I've been in therapy. I've been facing things I've buried since I was a kid. My father taught me that love was something you earned by obeying, by never messing up. My mother stayed even when he cheated, because she was afraid of starting over. I swore I'd never be like them, but I became worse. I became frozen. Elena looked out the window for a moment, watching a little boy outside draw chalk hearts on the sidewalk. You don't owe me explanations, she said. I'm glad you're doing the work. I really am, but I'm not here waiting. I stopped waiting the night you slammed that door. I know, he said. That's not why I came. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. I made a second donation. It's not through the foundation this time. It's personal. It's to fund scholarships for the kids here, under one condition. She raised an eyebrow, which is that you name the program after yourself. Not me, not Grace, you. Because what you're doing here isn't just important, it's extraordinary, and it deserves your name. Elena didn't take the envelope. Not yet. She studied him again, long and carefully. You always knew how to give, she said, but only on your terms. Only when it made you look powerful or generous or necessary. This feels different, is it? Yes, he said without hesitation, because I don't want anything from it. Not credit. Not redemption, not even your friendship, unless it's something you want. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. Thank you for that, for showing up as a person, not a brand. There was a long silence. Then she said, you know, when you kicked me out, I thought it would break me. I thought, how can I live without that world, that structure, that identity? But the truth is, I didn't just survive. I found myself again. I see that, he said. You're brighter. She smiled faintly. I had to remember who I was before you, before the mansion, before all of it. Is there any part of you that misses it? Not the way I thought I would, she admitted. I miss some of the quiet Sunday mornings. I miss the parts of you that weren't afraid. But the rest? No, I don't miss walking on eggshells. I don't miss trying to mold myself into someone who'd fit your image. Michael looked down at the envelope still in his hand. He finally set it gently on the bench beside her. No strings, he said again. She nodded. He stood. I'll go now, but I'll be watching from afar. Proud. Thank you for saying all of this, she said. I know it took something out of you. He paused at the door. It gave something back too. He left quietly. Elena sat for a while, staring at the envelope. Then she opened it. A check, substantial, and a handwritten note. For the children who will grow because of your strength. And for the woman who taught me that silence is not safety and love is not control. She closed it carefully. On the day of the opening, the sun was high and the ocean air filled with anticipation. Parents, city officials, local artists, and dozens of children filled the building with laughter and awe. Reporters came, but this time the cameras weren't searching for scandal. They were celebrating purpose. Elena took the stage in a modest outdoor courtyard. Behind her, the school banner fluttered in the breeze. She wore a simple dress, light blue, the the color of calm. "Welcome to Grace and Grit," she began. "This place is more than a school. It's a symbol of second chances, of creating instead of controlling, of healing through art and building through honesty." She scanned the crowd. People leaned in. Some wiped tears from their eyes. "I built this because I broke," she continued. "Not all at once, but slowly. And in the silence of that pain, I remembered something my grandmother used to say. You can let life harden you, or you can let it refine you. I chose refinement." The applause that followed was thunderous. Later, she walked through the crowd, hugging old friends, thanking donors, laughing with the children. She felt light, not perfect, not whole in every way, but no longer fractured by someone else's expectations. At the very edge of the crowd, standing beneath a tree, she spotted him. Michael. He wasn't dressed for attention. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers, clearly bought from a roadside vendor. He didn't approach. He just nodded at her and turned to leave. She smiled, softly. She wouldn't chase him. She wouldn't hold on to what had been. But she was grateful he had come. Grateful he had seen who she'd become. As the evening wore on, and the music from the courtyard filled the air, Elena looked out over the school she'd built and whispered to herself, "I made it. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of resilience." She had loved, she had lost, but she had not broken. And in the end, that was a lesson. Not that money protects, not that power guarantees happiness, but that sometimes what seems like the end of a dream is only the beginning of becoming who you were always meant to be. Would you have the courage to rebuild your life from the ashes, not with rage, but with grace?